battered wagon lay half-shattered in the gulch. Wheels snapped, canvas shredded by bullets. Blood stained the soil beneath it. Old blood, dry now, but fresh would soon follow. Clara Morgan stood barefoot in the dirt, her dress torn and streaked with grime, a rope dug into her neck, looped cruelly over the twisted limb of a cottonwood tree. Her hands trembled behind her back, tied so tight the skin had split. Her belly bulged under fabric, 8 months pregnant and heavy as storm clouds. Beside her, Eliza whimpered, just 7 years old, small for her age, barefoot, bruised. A second rope dangled from the branch, too large for her tiny neck, but the bastards had made it work. 3 men stood nearby, stained in dust and malice. Their laughter was dry and mean. One chewed tobacco with slow, exaggerated clicks of his jaw, spitting brown juice as he glanced between mother and daughter. "God, don't see much out here," one said, tapping the noose around Clara's neck. "Ain't no law says we can't hang squatters." "She ain't no squatter," muttered the youngest of them, a boy no older than 19, fidgeting with the butt of his rifle. "Her husband served with the Union. That ought to mean something." The leader turned. "It means he was a traitor, and traitors' wives hang same as them." Clara's lips were split, her face already swollen from the last blow, but she lifted her chin. "My husband died 2 years ago. He fought for the freedom of men you'd sooner string up than speak to. He believed in something." The leader's smile was full of rot and triumph. He believed wrong. Eliza cried out as the man grabbed the back of her dress and dragged her closer to the tree. "No, Mama, I don't want to." Clara lunged, choking on the rope as it yanked her back. She hit the ground hard, coughing, dirt in her mouth. Still she fought. Still she screamed. "Take me, not her. For God's sake, she's just a child." He ignored her. The boy hesitated, but he didn't stop him. None of them did. The leader shoved the barrel beneath Eliza's feet and tightened the rope around her neck. The child shook violently, lips trembling, tears streaking her face. "I swear to you," Clara gasped, struggling to her knees. "If you touch her—" "You'll what?" the leader sneered. "Die? That's the plan." The wind surged. A gust tore across the prairie, sending dust into their eyes. The horses tied nearby stamped and snorted. Something was coming, something more than a storm. The leader raised a hand, ready to kick the barrel out from under Eliza. That's when the arrow struck. It came without sound, a blur through the wind. The outlaw jerked backward, an obsidian point protruding from his throat. Blood spurted, steaming in the cold air. He fell with a gargled cry, hands clawing at his neck as he drowned in red. Panic erupted. The young one dropped his rifle. The other reached for his pistol, too slow. A figure emerged from the grass, tall, lean, cloaked in wind and war paint. Long black hair whipped across a face carved in stone. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and in his hand a tomahawk gleamed. The second outlaw raised his gun. Too late. Steel flashed. The tomahawk buried itself in his chest with a wet crunch, driving him back against the tree. He twitched once, then sagged. The boy ran, screaming into the grass. Clara couldn't breathe. She stared at the warrior, this silent, sudden force who moved like smoke and killed like thunder. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He moved straight to Eliza, cut the rope with a swift motion, and caught her as she fell. The girl sobbed into his shoulder, clinging to him like a child to her father. Then he turned to Clara. Their eyes met. Something ancient stirred between them, grief recognizing grief. He stepped forward, blade still dripping. Clara flinched, her breath hitching. He knelt. With a swift flick of his knife, he sliced the rope around her wrists, then the one at her throat. She crumpled to her knees, coughing, arms wrapping around her belly. "Why?" she whispered. The wind answered for him. He said nothing, just stared at her for a long moment. His eyes weren't kind, but they weren't cruel. They were tired, hollow, like something inside him had died long ago and hadn't bothered to leave. Then he turned away. Clara gathered Eliza in her arms. The girl was shaking, barely breathing. Clara's own limbs trembled, her heart still in her throat. In the distance, the boy's screams faded. He'd be back, maybe with more. The warrior stopped at the edge of the clearing, where the cottonwood creaked in the wind. He looked back once, waited. Clara looked down at her child, looked at the blood around them, looked at the broken wagon, at the empty plains that promised only death. She stood. The warrior vanished into grass, silent as dusk. Clara followed, and behind them, the wind rose again, whispering to the bones of the hanged men, as if the land itself had witnessed justice and chosen silence. Rain fell in sheets, drumming against stone and soaking the earth into mud. Thunder cracked across the hills, as if the heavens themselves were at war. Clara stumbled behind the silent warrior, one hand on her swollen belly, the other clutching Eliza close. Her boots had been torn away during the struggle, and her feet bled from jagged rocks, but she didn't complain, not with every step away from that cursed tree, feeling like survival. The warrior moved effortlessly through the terrain, his body coiled with quiet strength, never glancing back to see if she kept up. But he slowed just enough to let her follow. His bow was slung over his shoulder. A tomahawk dangled from his hip. He made no sound but the soft crunch of his moccasins on wet gravel. Even in the dark, he navigated the wild like it belonged to him. After an hour trudging uphill through wind and cold, they reached a narrow crevice in the rocks, nearly invisible behind a curtain of hanging moss. Without a word, he slipped inside. Clara hesitated at the threshold, water dripping from her hair, her fingers trembling around Eliza's, but the storm behind her roared with primal fury. Whatever lay ahead couldn't be worse than what they'd escaped. Inside, the cave was dry and narrow, warmed by a small fire tucked into a natural alcove. Animal pelts lined the stone floor. A worn clay pot simmered with the faint scent of herbs. The warrior knelt by the fire, feeding it with dry bark from a stash hidden near the entrance. Eliza clung to Clara, her tiny body shivering. Clara helped her down gently, peeling away her wet clothes and wrapping her in one of the pelts. The warrior stood, removed his own buffalo-hide cloak, and without ceremony draped it over them both. Then he sat again, back straight, eyes fixed on the flames. He hadn't spoken a single word. Clara tried to thank him, her voice hoarse. "You didn't have to save us." He didn't look at her, didn't move. Silence pressing like a third presence, thick and expectant. She stared into the fire, the orange glow reflecting in her wide eyes. Her body ached from cold and fear and exhaustion, but her mind reeled faster than it could rest. The images wouldn't stop. Eliza with noose around her neck, the arrow hitting the outlaw's throat, the boy's scream as he ran. The warrior stirred. He reached into a bundle near the wall and produced a leather pouch. From it, he withdrew dried leaves, crushed them between his palms, and dropped them into the pot. The scent of willow and something bitter filled the cave. He ladled the mixture into a horn cup and held it out to her. She hesitated, then took it with both hands. It burned down her throat, sharp and pungent, but almost instantly warmed her from within. The ache in her bones eased. Eliza, wrapped tight, drifted into uneasy sleep against her side. The warrior finally spoke. "Drink more." His voice was low, gravelly, whether like old bark. Not unkind, not welcoming, just real. Clara blinked at him. "You speak English." A nod. Nothing more. "Why did you help us?" He looked at her then, really looked, eyes dark as midnight storms. "I don't let children die," he said flatly. "Not again." She didn't press. Not now. There was something in his eyes, an ancient weight that didn't belong to words. He rose and turned toward the back of the cave, where a narrow tunnel disappeared into blackness. He didn't explain. He didn't ask permission. He simply vanished into the dark. Clara stared after him, heart pounding. The cave walls seemed to breathe. The fire popped softly. Wind howled beyond the entrance, but inside there was stillness. She shifted, checking Eliza's face. Peaceful, finally. Then her own hand drifted to her belly. The child within kicked, faint but steady. She whispered into the fire, "You're safe now for the moment." The warrior returned with a bundle of damp wood and wild herbs, dropping them beside the fire. Then he sat again, eyes never on her, always scanning, listening. "What's your name?" she asked. A pause. "Tanatoa." She repeated it softly, letting the syllables roll across her tongue. Tanatoa. He didn't smile, but he didn't correct her. Later, he handed her a carved wooden bowl filled with something thick. Rabbit stew, or something like it. It wasn't much, but after 2 days without real food, it might as well have been a feast. "Eat," he said simply. She obeyed. She didn't question anymore. She was too tired to resist the quiet command in his voice. Eliza stirred once in her sleep, and Tanatoa rose, adjusting the cloak over her tiny shoulders. His movements were careful, precise. Clara watched him, mind fogged with fatigue, but sharp with curiosity. There was something unnatural about him. Not in a wicked way, but in the way a cliff face seems to defy time. Solid, scarred, unmoving. She caught glimpses of faded scars across his back when his shirt shifted, a row of punctures on his ribs, an old bullet wound on his shoulder, long since healed. He saw her looking and turned away. "I lost my husband," she said suddenly, voice breaking. "Last winter. Fever took him. He died screaming. I buried him in snow. I had to dig with my hands. We came west for peace, but—" Her voice cracked. Tanatoa said nothing. She didn't expect him to, but after a long silence, he spoke again, low as a prayer. "I lost my wife, and our boy. Soldiers came, burned our winter camp, shot the women first." Clara's heart squeezed. He picked up a stick, poking the fire. "I buried ashes. That was all, and it was enough." They sat in silence until the flames died to embers. Sleep hovered just beyond reach, but Clara finally let her eyes close. The cave, though foreign and rough, felt warmer than any place she'd known in weeks. When she opened her eyes again, he was still there, watching the mouth of the cave like a wolf on guard. She whispered into the dark, "Thank you." He didn't answer, but he didn't leave. And outside, the storm kept moving east, howling for blood it would not find. Dawn broke pale and cold over the prairie, light creeping through the cracks in the cave like hesitant fingers. The fire had long gone to ash, and Clara sat against the stone wall, arms wrapped around Eliza and the tiny child stirring beneath her ribs. Her eyes were open, but she hadn't slept. The weight of survival pressed against her spine like a boulder, and her limbs ached from too many nights curled in fear. Every breath felt borrowed. Tanatoa crouched at the mouth of the cave, motionless. He hadn't moved in hours. If he'd slept, Clara hadn't seen it. He scanned the plains below with the focus of a predator, eyes narrowed beneath his war-streaked brow. The morning wind whipped through his long hair, yet he remained still, silent as stone. She studied him now the way one studies a bear from behind a thin wall. Powerful, unpredictable, but not cruel. Not anymore. When he turned, his eyes met hers. "You need to walk today," he said. Clara's heart sank. "I can't go far. The baby, not far, but we must move." He didn't elaborate. He never did. Eliza stirred beside her and whimpered, eyes blinking open. Clara brushed the girl's hair away from her face. "We have to keep going, sweetheart. Just a little longer." The girl clung to her, weak and quiet. Tanatoa packed swiftly, his movements practiced, efficient, a skin of water, dried meat, flint and twine. He carried no excess, not even comfort. Clara winced as she stood. The pressure in her abdomen was worse now, heavy and low. She didn't say it aloud, but she could feel it. The baby was coming. Not today, perhaps, but soon. Sooner than she was ready for. She followed him out into the pale morning light, shielding her eyes as they descended a narrow ridge. Eliza trudged beside her, holding Clara's hand with a death grip. The world felt impossibly big out here. No towns, no fences, just endless land and the winds moaning. It would swallow them if they stopped moving. They reached a small grove beside a creek. By midday, a fallen log served as their seat. Tanatoa left without a word and returned with a rabbit, skinned, cleaned, roasting on a spit within minutes. Clara marveled at how efficiently he worked. Everything he did had purpose. As Eliza ate, he sat beside the girl and handed her a piece of flint. "Strike here," he said, showing her a small rock. She tried, clumsily. Sparks flew. Her eyes lit up. Clara watched from across the fire, surprised. Her daughter hadn't smiled since the hanging tree. Tanatoa handed her a twig. Dry moss. Blowed gently. Eliza did, and the flame flared to life. Clara blinked back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't respond, but a faint flicker of something passed through his face. Later, as the sun slipped behind the hills, he approached Clara with a bundle of cloth. Inside were small wooden carvings, a horse, a bear, a woman holding a child. "For your daughter," he said. Clara took them in trembling hands. "You made these?" He nodded once. She turned the small figure over, marveling at the detail. "You lost a child too, didn't you?" He sat down slowly, gaze fixed on the dying fire. "My son. He was 5, laughed all the time. He chased prairie dogs, believed he could fly. I told him he could. I lied." Her breath caught in her throat. "They came before the frost. Soldiers. Shot the women. Burned our winter camp. I buried bones that weren't whole." Silence followed. Not empty silence, but heavy, sacred. She reached out and, without thinking, placed a hand lightly on his. Calloused, warm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. His fingers curled but didn't pull away. As the fire dimmed, pain lanced through her lower back. She gasped, folding forward. Tanatoa was at her side in an instant. "It's the baby," she groaned. "I think it's coming." He moved swiftly, gathering pelts, boiling water, placing her near the heat. Eliza stood frozen in panic. "Stay by the fire," he told the girl firmly. "She will need you after." The next hour was pure agony. Clara screamed, gripping fur and stone. Blood pooled. Her vision blurred. The world shrank to pain, to breath, to instinct. Tanatoa never left her side. He caught the child himself, cutting the cord with a knife heated in the flames, wrapping the squirming newborn in hide. Clara sobbed when she heard the first cry, raw, loud, furious. He handed the child to her, small, red-faced, alive. "A girl," he said. Clara held the baby close, whispering nonsense through her tears. "You made it. You're here. You're safe." Eliza crawled into her side, eyes wide with awe. Tanatoa rose, hands bloodstained, chest rising with slow breath. "You are strong," he said quietly. Clara looked up at him, hair matted with sweat and dirt. "I didn't think I was." "Strong doesn't mean fearless," he said. "It means you keep walking." She wanted to say more, wanted to ask him why he stayed, why he helped, but exhaustion pulled her under like water. Later that night, she woke to find him outside the cave, staring at the stars. She joined him, the newborn asleep in a sling across her chest. "You could have left us," she said. "Any time." He didn't look at her. "I did not want to." She watched his profile in the moonlight. There was pain in it, but also peace. "You're not just saving us," she said gently. "You're saving yourself." His eyes flicked to hers. "Maybe." Behind them, Eliza stirred in her sleep. The fire crackled softly. Clara reached down and touched his hand again. This time, he didn't hesitate. And in the stillness of that wild night, with the scent of pine and blood in the air, they sat together, two ghosts of different wars, bound by ashes, and something new neither of them dared name yet. Smoke curled from the fire as dawn bled across the sky, painting the clouds in pale reds and bruised purples. Clara sat against the cave wall, her newborn swaddled close, the rise and fall of the tiny chest anchoring her in this fragile moment of peace. Eliza slept curled at her side, her fingers still clutching one of the wooden carvings Tanatoa had made. He was outside, as he always was in the morning, watching the ridgeline, listening to the wind like it whispered secrets meant only for him. Clara knew something was wrong before he returned. She read it in his posture. He moved faster, lower, eyes sweeping across the cave as he stepped inside. He took up his bow, checked the tautness of the string, and reached for his quiver. "They found us," he said. Her stomach twisted. "How many?" she asked, her voice already thin. 4, maybe 5. The boy who ran brought them. Clara's breath caught. She looked down at her baby, then to Eliza, who blinked awake at the sound of urgency in their voices. Tanatoa knelt in front of the child. You stay here, with your sister. No matter what you hear, you don't come out unless she calls you. Do you understand? Eliza nodded, eyes wide and glassy with fear. Clara adjusted the sling holding the infant and reached for the rifle he placed beside her. Her hands trembled. He saw it. You don't need to fight, he said. I do, she answered. They came to kill my children. If I don't stand, they'll fall. There was no time for ceremony, no time for last words or whispered courage. The air outside grew thicker with tension, like the sky itself had drawn a breath and held it. Then the first shot rang out, sharp, cracking, echoing down the rocks. Tanatoa didn't flinch. He moved like water, slipping out of the cave and into the brush. Clara crept toward the edge of the cave mouth, rifle ready, heartbeat thundering in her ears. The second shot came closer. A figure darted between boulders, rifle raised. Clara leveled her aim and squeezed the trigger. The shot hit the man's leg. He screamed and dropped, writhing. Before he could reach for his gun, another arrow plunged into his chest. Tanatoa's work. Silent, precise. Gunfire erupted in reply. Sparks burst from the rocks. Clara ducked back, heart pounding. She shielded the baby and turned to Eliza. Stay hidden. Hold your sister tight. Eliza nodded and disappeared into the back of the cave. Outside, Tanatoa was a blur of motion. He danced between shadows, never staying still long enough to be caught. He moved with a kind of deadly grace, lethal and fluid, like the land itself bent to his will. Another man rushed the cave entrance, yelling as he raised his shotgun. Clara fired. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The man jerked and fell sideways, groaning, blood spreading across his chest. She gasped, the rifle falling from her hands. Her arm throbbed, but she didn't stop moving. She grabbed the gun again, reloaded with trembling fingers. A scream rang out. She turned in time to see one of the attackers slam the butt of his rifle into Tanatoa's side, sending him sprawling across the rocks. Blood spilled from his temple. The attacker raised his weapon for the killing blow. Clara ran from the cave. No! Her voice tore through the chaos. The man turned. She raised a rifle and fired without thinking. He dropped. Clara rushed to Tanatoa's side, dropping the weapon as she fell to her knees. His eyes fluttered open, blood running down his cheek. She pressed her hands against the wound. You're not dying, she said, voice shaking. Not now. He groaned, tried to sit. Still two left. I'll handle them. She helped him cover, then picked up the rifle and waited. Footsteps crunched in the gravel. She steadied her breath. Her baby cried in the cave, and every sound stabbed her heart, but she focused. A man stepped into view, gun raised, grin stretched wide. He recognized her. Well, look here. The widow got teeth. She fired. Missed. He aimed, and then he stopped, jerked sideways. Arrow embedded in his throat. Tanatoa had crawled from cover, pulled the bowstring back with bloodied hand, and fired one last shot. The man crumpled. The final outlaw turned and fled. Clara didn't chase him. She collapsed beside Tanatoa, both of them gasping, stained with blood and ash and sweat. You're bleeding, she said. So are you, he muttered. He tried to rise. She pressed a hand to his chest. Rest. It's done. She didn't know if she was talking to him or to herself. They lay on the cool earth, staring up at the open sky. The clouds had broken. Blue bled through. In the distance, birds returned to the trees. Later, she stitched his wound with shaking hands. The baby nestled against her chest. Eliza pressed into her side. The warrior winced, but didn't complain. Why didn't you leave? She asked quietly. Tanatoa looked at her, eyes steady. Because the world already took everything from me. I won't let it take you too. Tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. They buried the bodies at evening beneath the cottonwood tree they had nearly died under. No words were spoken, just a shovel in the dirt, just the sound of earth reclaiming its own. As the sun set, Clara stood with Eliza on one side and her baby in her arms. Tanatoa stood on the other. Their shadows stretched long across the ground. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked at the horizon. "You stay, if you choose." She didn't hesitate. "I choose." He turned to her then, and for the first time, a smile ghosted across his face, small but real. They walked back together, not as strangers, but as survivors, bound by blood, by fire, and by the choice to live when everything said they shouldn't. And as the stars bloomed overhead, Clara Morgan knew the prairie had not taken her life. It had given it back,